welcome. Obviously, like all meetings, this meeting was planned when it was the other May. That's the one, that was cold, wet. You probably, it's a few days since that happened. But so I'm really pleased that you were able to come out on such a lovely afternoon. And I'm sorry to take you away from your gardens and your parks and whatever else you want to do. And very, very pleased that you can come to the meeting. The last public meeting we had was back in March, and it's really nice to be able to meet with everybody, particularly supporters and people who are still interested in the campaign against water fluoridation. So for those of you who do not know, I think most people have been, my name is Stephen Pecker. I'm just the current chair of Hampshire Against Fluoridation. And can someone help open the back door, please? Thank you. Welcome. So what we're going to do this afternoon, and we're trying to keep it definitely within the 2 hours so that you can get back out into this lovely weather. I just to take the opportunity to look back over aspects of the campaign and where we might go and what we might think about next. And I'll explain a bit more about the reasoning behind that. Some are personal, some are to do with the way that the current recent legislation. And then David Harrison, Councillor David Harrison, is going to say a few words. And David's been a really good supporter of both Hampshire Against Fluoridation, but because he's been on the Hampshire County Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee, he's also been in this from the beginning. So I'm very pleased that he can come along and give a kind of a different view on this. Then a chance for some questions and discussion, and then we've got a short formal meeting. If you don't want to stay for the short formal meeting, you don't have to. Basically, we are technically supposed to have an annual general meeting every year. We always do it. It's very informal and just a very simple kind of ending of the meeting. We've got refreshments if you want them. The other things I need to tell you is that if the fire alarm goes off, it is actually a fire alarm, and we either go out the back door there or through the side door just here and just go into the far end of the car park. And in terms of toilets, there are 2 toilets. One's just by the entrance you saw, and there's another one behind me here. So that's the kind of the beginning of introductions, and any questions that you have, anytime during the afternoon, talk to people who are on the committee. We've got some materials around. We've got sheets for you to sign up if you haven't signed up onto our email list. We've got postcards. I'll come back to the postcards again in a minute. It doesn't matter whether you've sent a postcard before, you are more than welcome to send another one. It doesn't hurt the SHA to have a few postcards. And if you want to take, we've got plenty, so if you want to take some and give them to your friends, neighbours or whatever, please do. And we have got some with stamps, so if you wanted to put a small donation in, we've got some stamp cards as well. So that's the kind of beginning introductions. And what I wanted to do was really just kind of give a little bit of an overview and a brief overview, because it has been quite a long time. Do you remember these 2 guys? Those of you that were at a meeting in February 2009. On the left is Dr. Geoffrey Harris, who was chair of the South Central Strategic Health Authority, and Jim Easton, who was the chief executive, very glum-faced. Which they were. I can still remember, I sat in the front row, how stony-faced they were at that particular meeting. And do you remember this kind of statement? Do you remember this? It'll be in within the year. That was their statement afterwards. They were so pleased, they'd done everything as far as they were concerned right. It didn't matter that the majority of people in the consultation had not wanted to support it, that the evidence was poor, whatever. They were determined they had the right decision. And in a way, of course, here we are, 3.5 years later, and there's still none of this fluoride in our water. And that's due to lots of things. It's due to you, it's due to the way the campaign has been driven, it's due to the judicial review. So I wanted to just have to take the chance to look back on some of those things and then to think about what we're going to do and what we can do in the future. So one of the reasons that it's time to reflect on this is in March 2012, a new piece of legislation hit the law books, the Health and Social Care Act. A lot about complete reorganisation of the NHS, but importantly, within this, because of that reorganisation, there were some sections which related to water fluoridation. And what will happen because of the changes to the health service in England is that from the 1st of April next year, local authorities, which would be Southampton and Hampshire, will become responsible for decisions about either putting fluoride in water, changing the area that's fluoridated or the level of fluoridation or whatever, and stopping schemes that already exist will be handed to local authorities. And in our area, that would be Southampton City Council and Hampshire County Council. Fortunately, both of them oppose water fluoridation. So we have a situation here where in its dying moments, the last 10 months, we have a strategic health authority which wants to implement a scheme which the powers that will take over do not want and do not wish to implement. And I think that's a very, very important point, and it's something we need to think about. So how have we got here? Well, after the decision on the 26th of February 2009, one of the first things that we did was to start a petition which was taken to 10 Downing Street. And a large number of us went up and took this huge pile of 15,000 plus signatures into 10 Downing Street. I mean, we didn't think necessarily that Gordon Brown at the time would turn around and say, well, I don't think we should stop fluoridation in Southampton. But the important thing is, we were responding to what was an absolute outcry of anger against the SHA's decision back in February 2009. And I think it was a good response. It raised the tempo of the campaign. It engaged more people. It brought more people into the discussion. It brought more people into contact with Hampshire Against Fluoridation. And so after the decision, in a sense, there was more outcry than there was during the consultation itself. And so a year later, in 2010, to mark the fact that, in fact, it hadn't got in within the year, as predicted by the SHA, we had an open letter which was signed by lots of local, in fact, dentists, many local politicians, scientists, academics, people representing local organisations. And we took this letter up to the Strategic Health Authority in Newbury. Come on in. In Newbury, we had to let them know that, in fact, the opposition had not gone away, that actually the opposition was still there, and the fact that the SHA still thought they were in the right didn't mean to say that everybody else had laid down and gone home. In fact, again, the opposition was growing. So the other thing that began to start in 2010, you remember that a local resident then started a judicial review against the Strategic Health Authority, really saying that because there was this huge opposition, and in fact in discussions in Parliament, it had been promised that no fluoridation scheme would be put in against the wishes of local people. Unfortunately, the law didn't quite say that. But we had the judicial review then in 2011. And unfortunately, Ms Milner lost her case. But on the other hand, it was a huge delay. And we have to be really thankful to that, because any delay, and during those kinds of delays, the campaign just seems to get bigger and stronger. It doesn't kind of get less, and it just seems to grow and grow and grow. And the other really significant thing that happened last year was that we were able to use new powers given to communities to get local authorities to debate key important issues of interest to local people if you collected sufficient signatures. Well, we had to collect about 2,000 signatures, and we thought that's fine. We actually very easily managed to collect over 6,000. And that's without really trying. We didn't go out in the streets as we did in the first petition. People just sent them to us. Hundreds and hundreds of signatures. I mean, just showing the level of anger that there was. And that led to the City Council having to debate our petition and actually also having to debate a motion which was put up by our local Liberal and Adrian Vinson here from the Liberal Democrat Party, but also one from the Tory group. And that happened last September. And it was very important. And that's the motion that got passed. And it's really key that the motion opposes. Now, why is it important? Because during the consultation, as you all know, the City Council supported the idea of water fluoridation. But that was before, I think, it recognised how much local opposition there was, but also, I think, beginning to grow and understand that some of the council beginning to understand actually that the scientific evidence supporting water fluoridation is actually very weak. So we now have a City Council which is fully opposed to water fluoridation, and look at the last bit, is committed to actually prevent or stop it being implemented when they have the powers. They get the powers next April. So it's really, really important that it's recognised that the City Council, like the County Council, will have the legal powers relating to decisions around water fluoridation. But the City Council changed in May, as I'm sure you know, and saw in the papers again today, I noticed. The Labour group, which actually on the whole had not supported that motion, is now in control of the City Council. And clearly that's significant. And apart from a couple of Labour councils, on the whole, they all voted, in a sense, for the continuation and for the implementation of water fluoridation. So this is still a very important issue, an important battle that we need to engage with the City Council. Except, of course, at the moment, the motion is that the City Council opposes it. Now, there has been a kind of a shift, particularly by the Labour leader, Richard Williams, who is now saying that he believes that a referendum should be held. What do we want a referendum for? Surely we know there's opposition. 72% of the people who responded to the initial consultation were against it. We don't need a referendum to know. And is actually a referendum the right way to deal with something which is essentially a medication? You know, why should we vote on whether we're medicated? That's just nonsense. And what a waste of money. Just think of even if you did it with another vote that was going on, it would still have to be counted separately, and they've spent enough money on this already. And now I see on the front page, discussions and continuing discussions about budget cuts. So, is this the right use of our local taxes? There are other ways of complaining as well. And there are some formal complaints. Back in, at the beginning or just at the end of the consultation, I in fact, through Hampshire Against Fluoridation, put in a complaint to the Ombudsman, who governs whether public bodies do things correctly, complaining about the way that the consultation had been done, and particularly about the way they'd actually reviewed a lot of the evidence, because in fact they ignored much of the evidence that was put to them by bodies such as Hampshire Against Fluoridation. So, but because the judicial review then happened, I was told that they wouldn't investigate while there was a legal process going on. Well, obviously that was settled last June. I've since been writing to the SHA to establish whether they're still going to continue or not, and they clearly are. So I have re-instigated my complaint about the whole process to think that it's wrong. But also, there's another complaint gone in, because what we're looking at is, if we go back to this idea that local authorities who oppose it are going to take over and are committed to stopping water fluoridation, just think of the monumental waste of money to put in the capital of building dosing stations and sorting this all out and actually doing all the work. That is really a waste of public resources. And it does seem to be very profligate as well at the moment when we know that there is a constraint. So that complaint is just being looked at by the Health Ombudsman as well. So there's a kind of a formal way of actually complaining. And the formal way is you have to complain to the SHA first, and when they turn around and say, no, we're doing everything right because we're really nice, then you complain through to the Ombudsman. But those complaints have been looked at. Unfortunately, the Ombudsman had no power to stop the SHA doing anything, but they have at least the power to embarrass the SHA and say that actually they're doing the wrong procedures. When at most they could ask them to look at their procedures and repeat some of those procedures, but they can't actually stop them. So I'm jumping, it's one of our problems. So those complaints gone in, and I think one of the important things, I was looking at the website of the Strategic Health Authority yesterday, and on the website you will see that point at the bottom. But actually, they are proudly saying, the SHA, that they recognise that Southampton City Council is against this, but it doesn't make any difference. Now, for those of you who can remember, who was there on the 26th of February 2009? A few. Do you remember them making a big deal of how the City Council supported, and therefore, because the City Council supported it, then this is obviously something good? But actually, when the City Council now opposes it, then they're unimportant. It doesn't matter. There's a complete change of view. But there are other things happening as well. In the European Union, a number of, well, in fact, two things in particular are happening, and they join together. A couple of years ago, the Irish Group Against Fluoridation, run by Robert Pocock, actually put up a petition to the European Union asking them to implement directives about medications and the fact that water fluoridation would be classed as a medication. And that's kind of been rumbling through the EU bureaucracy. One of the things that resulted from that is that they commissioned a scientific review within the European Union to look at water fluoridation. Now that review was published last June, which basically says that water fluoridation is a crude way of dealing with things like dental health. It's also very clear that in areas with water fluoridation, babies and young children would get excess fluoride. All right, they would actually breach the maximum normally agreed limits for fluoride. They called it a kind of an outdated policy and didn't think it had any benefits over and above other ways of dealing with dental health problems. So a fairly kind of damning report, and it raised questions about the need for more research on some of the health problems which are associated with water fluoridation. Well, that petition is still there, so having got the scientific report, basically what they're saying is, well, now hang on, now you've got the scientific report, you need to look at this petition again and force the Commission to look at its procedures. And that's been really, really slow. Robert Pocock has been pushing this, but we're not really, and we need to keep getting the support of our local MEPs. And in particular, one of our local MEPs is on that the important committee. It's called the Petty Committee. I mean, not petty because it's not important, they're just actually called the Petty Committee. So Keith Taylor. Now, Keith Taylor came to Totton a couple of months ago and stood there and promised that he would get involved in this. And I wrote to him, and he said, well, you know, yes, I am supporting it, it's still going through, and yes, he's kind of keeping an eye on this, but we need to put some pressure onto our local MEPs. And we've got some information about our local MEPs on the table over there, but in particular Keith Taylor is to write to him and say, what are you doing about the water fluoridation issue? Please, 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 you know, it's all very well that I can write to him and he's saying he's going to do it, but obviously the more people that can write to him, and you're perfectly entitled, like your councillor, like your MP, to write to your MEP to do this. So you need to write to them and say, what are you doing to pursue the petition on water fluoridation in the European Union? And I think, it's important because there are guidelines, and if those guidelines were applied properly, then water fluoridation would essentially be illegal. And we've got to push these things forward. So it's not just the science, this is about legality. I mean, it is a medicine. It needs to be treated as a medicine. And if the proper directives were applied, then it would be seen as a medicine. We need to kind of think about, we kind of all focus here on Southampton. I think it's absolutely right, because we don't want it in our water. It's absolutely right we don't. But actually, there's not many countries that use water fluoridation, but actually this is a kind of an international fight in some ways. And what's really important is in North America, which is really the kind of birthplace of water fluoridation, the number of communities and cities now stopping water fluoridation. And they're stopping it because they recognize that there's been an absolute epidemic of dental fluorosis. So this is the whitening and the blotching of the teeth. Recognize that in fluoridated areas, over 50% of teenagers now have fluorosed teeth. Now some of those, 4%, so if we think about Southampton, we're talking about several hundred young people, will probably get damaged teeth over the next kind of 10, 20 years. So they're stopping it because of this. And there is a current recommendation for lowering levels of fluoride in the USA. It's already been done in Canada, already been done in Ireland, already been done in Hong Kong. They all have lower levels because of this concern about dental fluorosis. So what about here? They're not concerned about dental fluorosis whatsoever. It's still 1 part per million, irrespective of the huge amount of evidence now that shows that that is completely wrong. And even the EU saying, well, actually, at that level, then people are going to get more fluoride than they should. So, there's some really important things that are going on. Recently, in New Hampshire, in the USA, the Senate have passed a law requiring annual water bills to carry a warning about using fluoridated water for making up baby formula. Of course, in Old Hampshire, it's not quite like that. In fact, the SHA website now says that because of the concern shown during the consultation, note the wording, because of the concern, not because of the evidence, because of the concern shown by local people, they will produce guidance to parents before they implement fluoridation. That's it. That's their commitment. What guidance? No idea. So, what happens there? But, this is important. There are millions of people who are having fluoride taken out of their water. There are 190,000 people with an SHA hell-bent on fluoridating in this country. This is some nonsense. This is still nonsense here. But actually, there is a shifting ground here. Gradually there's a growing kind of scientific and academic criticism. And just recently, if we just think of recently, there's been a number of papers. There was a paper by David Shaw, who's an ethicist who works actually in the Dental and Medical School in Glasgow, suggesting that water fluoridation is illegal in this country. Point to be tested in law, but very well argued paper. There's a paper just about to come out in a major public health ethics journal, which is actually arguing, this is by an Australian, which I think is pretty brave. Those who heard Paul Connett talk about Australia, arguing that in Australia, water fluoridation is unethical. I've recently done a paper myself in Critical Public Health talking about the way the evidence is being used. And there was a paper very recently, which is actually a review of aluminium in relation to Alzheimer's disease, but actually talks about the important role of water fluoridation and arguing from that perspective that water fluoridation should be reviewed in respect of the way that interacts with aluminium, which is used to cleanse the water supply. So there is beginning to be a kind of a discussion. It is unfortunate. I actually wrote to David Shaw, who did the law, and said, well done, great article. It's really difficult doing this. I've tried to put some papers into a dental journal and been unsuccessful. And he wrote back and said, yes, I've tried dental journals, but they don't take any paper that is critical of water fluoridation. So there's still a long way to go here, but there is beginning to be this kind of scientific debate. Because we're looking back, I thought it's also nice to kind of catch us, because we've had some really good support, and in particular, Paul Connett has been a great supporter of the work that's gone on in Southampton and the Fluoride Action Network. And many of you came and listened to him talk about the book which he co-authored with Dr. Beck and the third name. And also the National Pure Water Association has been really supportive in supporting many of the things that we do, and that's been really good and something which we've been really, really grateful for. And I have to say, Paul's such a nice bloke as well, so it's been an absolute pleasure to meet him. We have to thank the Echo, Matt's here, but John Reed in particular. The Daily Echo in particular, since the decision was taken in February, has been absolutely brilliant at kind of maintaining and keeping the debate alive. And also the Livingston Times, Meridian TV have taken a real interest in this story. It's, Meridian TV in particular, probably thinking, well, we're going to get nowhere, but actually have kept tabs on what we've been doing and have been reasonably supportive and covered many of the things that we have done. But, a big thank you to the Echo. So, thinking now a bit about what are we doing, where do we go? It's great being against water fluoridation, and I think that's really important. I'm not understating that kind of fact. But how do we deal with dental health problems in the city? And one of the other changes in the legislation now with the new Health and Social Care Bill is that the City Council becomes responsible actually for dental health in the city. Now here's an opportunity for us to start campaigning for things that they should be doing, not just what they shouldn't be doing. If any of you at the debate in the council chamber, you would have heard another petitioner, Sue, talking about why don't we engage community groups and think about this as a kind of a community way of doing things. Well, that is done. It's done in other parts of the country. In Scotland, the Child Smile scheme, which is what this particular logo is about, is a programme started in Glasgow. It was started in 7 areas, very deprived areas in Glasgow. It actually had an impact on reducing dental decay in the whole of the city of Glasgow. It was so successful in fact, that it's been rolled out nationally across the whole of Scotland. Every area of Scotland does Child Smile. And it's an education, it's about providing interventions to the children who need them most, it's about